every day, I'm like, I could really take a nap still. So thanks everybody for jumping on and Kat for being so responsive and figuring out that that wasn't going to work out. Um, so I have the slides. So sharing is not turned on. Let's see, I'm gonna send a request to you, Kat.
All right, that should work now.
Okay, beautiful. Hang on one second. And I'll just let everybody know that I am solo parenting this week. Thank you. And so I might have to hop off it or just kind of like go off video at some point when my children return home. Okay, just a heads up. So let's see if I go to slideshow. Can folks see my screen? Probably not, huh?
Not yet.
Okay. Sorry, I have to go through the permissions. Um, Give me one second. I don't know if anybody did anything fun for spring break and wants to share while I figure this out, but
I got sick too. There's something definitely going around. I had a few good days, but then it hit me. So definitely been going around.
Yeah, same. It just barely hit me today, but we took the kids to the farm over the weekend, so that was fun.
I actually was staying in a haunted castle up in Port Townsend, and when I started coming down with symptoms. But otherwise, we had a fun time. I was with some of my friends from high school, so yeah, that was fun.
Nice. Cat, what's the name of your cat?
This is Lilu.
Lily.
Yes, we have three cats. Lilu, Nibbler, and Flurf. I'm excited.
Nibbler and Flurf.
Yeah, yes. I'm grateful to know that the board meeting recordings stay on like in the world on a little hard drive in a fireproof vault for like 100 years minimum. So I'm really excited to know that my cats will be preserved in time by their presence in these virtual meetings. So it's very exciting.
That's awesome. It's like a time machine.
I know, right? Um, okay, Alyssa's rejoining. Excellent. I'm assuming what needed to happen was restarting things, which is what happens to me when I have to update permissions. So we're glad to have you back. And screen sharing is successful. Good job. Alyssa, you are muted, so I'm not sure if you're yeah, there you go.
all right, awesome. Thanks for the patience there. All right, welcome everybody to our third quarterly meeting. I'm sorry to hear about everybody that got sick too. Um, so do we have anybody for public comment, Kat?
We do not. No public comment today.
So here's our agenda. Just a quick overview. We're going to do the thing where we review our committee duties and the policy objectives. We have time for a student update, a staff update. I believe that Eddie wasn't able to make it to this meeting, so we'll skip our board update unless anybody else has something they want to share related to the PPS board. And then I'm hoping that we can spend the bulk of our time talking through kind of our deliverables that we have for the rest of this calendar or school year. So those are our district AI recommendations that it would be great if we could put together while that work group is doing their work, if we can kind of be proactive and talk about how we think that they can align better with the Climate Crisis Response Committee or policy goals. The Climate the policy is coming up for review. I still don't think we have a date for when the PPS School Board Policy Review Committee is going to discuss it. But again, wanting to be thoughtful about what us as a committee might recommend they think about when they're looking at the policy again with fresh eyes. And then also our annual report, which is kind of the most like proximal deadline that we have. So my hope is that we can just spend some time as a larger group talking about any like suggestions or thoughts that we have or recommendations that we would want the then work group to think about when they go and we break out into work groups to talk about what those recommendations will look like in the annual report. So that's the overview. Before we move on, does anybody have any questions about that? And I will say it did shift a little bit from my email. I think I thought that we could use some of this time to actually get some of that work done. And maybe we will end early and we could start talking about that. But I actually thought it might be more useful for us to talk as a larger group. And then that April 15th meeting that we still have on the calendar, I was talking with Kat and thinking maybe that's an opportunity that people already have that in their calendar. And if the work groups wanted to meet on that date, then they could, if that made sense for them. Or once we're in our groups, if there's a better time, we could use that time however we see fit. And then we'll have our next climate crisis response quarterly meeting in like mid-May, which is coming up soon too. So any questions? I can't see anybody. If you want to come off mute, if you have a question, feel free.
I just wanted to share a quick note that the board presentation was rescheduled to May 12th instead of April 14th. And so that's actually right before the next quarterly meeting, so can discuss kind of timelines with that, and wanted to flag that materials for that will be due April 28th. So putting that out there.
Awesome. Yeah. And I have those dates lined out too and further slides just because it started to feel a little like I got overwhelmed thinking about it. So we can go through all the dates and hear everybody's thoughts and capacity. So I just really want to be mindful about everybody's time as we move through this. So there's no other questions. I'm still figuring out how to go to the next slide. There we go. So our duties as a committee are to receive regular reports from district staff, mostly Kat, around the policy goals and directives, to determine whether the status of implementation are consistent with the goals, and then to share our written findings with the board on at least an annual basis. And we also get to make recommendations as part of that. And these are the overarching objectives of the climate crisis response policy, which are the two overarching objectives are the emissions reductions that we know we're feeling good about for 2030, our decarbonization goals, and then engagement, resilience, and wellness. And those two objectives are broken down into three pillars, which I thought I would add here this time, which are to reduce environmental impact and costs, improve health and wellness of our student employee population and frontline communities, and to provide effective environmental and sustainability education. Those are our grounding slides. Do we want to switch now to Alma and Leah? You guys have time to share an update?
Hi, is Leah here? I didn't see her.
No, unfortunately, Leo wasn't able to make it today.
Okay, no worries. Well, we didn't have a specific update prepared. Sometimes we like read it out. But we do want to update, and maybe Kat will even be able to update you guys in a more detailed fashion about this. But Kat, Leah, and I met. We went through the whole student survey that was put out last year. We revised a couple of the questions, but most of them we kept the same, just so that it'll be easier to compare data from year to year. This year, hopefully we will get more responses because we have like the comms team working with us, and hopefully we'll be able to reach more people this way. We're also going to send out the link to all of the high school PSAF groups. So just to recap, this is a survey for high school students. It's about climate action in PPS. We got some really great responses last year. And so, yeah, hopefully that goes well. It closes at the end of April. And since the board meeting has been moved to May 12th, maybe now we'll have the opportunity to share some of the results with the board. But that's all I have.
Yep, I'll just add that our so it looks like Murtaza asked in the chat if we could share a copy of the survey, and we can definitely do that. And wanted to, yeah, just emphasize that our amazing comms team is getting that out on Trivery today to high school students, and then we'll have the opportunity to just kind of promote it at the variety of different events coming up. So really excited to see that go out though.
Here's a question for Alma and Kat. I'm wondering, do we have a mechanism for the data that's collected to be kind of integrated into how we either like communicate with students or implement the climate work? Like, what's the translation of the results that we get into how we respond? Like, how are our responses?
That's a great question. So I'll speak from the staff management side of things, which is that the questions asked in the survey are really helpful for us as staff people, and by us I mean me, to look at like how students are feeling engaged and like aware of the climate work at PPS. So when we're talking about what questions to ask in the survey, it really comes back to like what's going to be most helpful for actually like guiding and informing the work of staff to implement the climate policy, as well as there's a question that was adjusted in the survey this year that says like, what if you could, share anything with PPS leadership, what would you want to share with them? And that kind of helps be able to directly take student voice and aggregate it and synthesize it to be able to share major themes with our leadership. And I think that'll be really helpful when we're talking about priorities and trade-offs and all of the things that we talk about in big systems change. So at the moment, the official process is I look at all the data and I say, wow, it sounds like this is really the best way to reach students, or these are the areas students are really not feeling engaged in, and think about kind of my scope and how we work together, especially with the student climate projects. I think that's where it was really helpful this last year. Yeah, and definitely would love to make that more of an open and iterative process, like a community engaged and led process, as capacity and resources allow.
Yeah, and I'll just add that the survey is designed with like how we might use the responses in mind. So we're being really intentional with the questions, making sure that the responses we get are gonna enable us to be productive and to make real change. Like one of the questions is, what's the best way to reach you about climate action? And so they can be like my email, Trivery, parent, like the parent square thing. So we did really think about when we were making the survey, how can this data actually help and inform the district?
Yeah, Murtaz, I see your hand up.
Yeah, is there a mechanism for closing the loop on that? Like, when the district gets the student responses, and hopefully enacts changes based on that. Is there a mechanism for updating the student body about what changes were made and the impacts from those?
Yeah, my dream and my goal is to be able to share at the beginning of the school year with the board and the broader community, like how the student data, like the student survey data influenced the planning for the year ahead in terms of like how we're engaging and what we're engaging. Um, it it did influence it this year, but I didn't have the opportunity to like share it out with folks. So it's definitely something I really want to think about is again, given like capacity and resources, what that looks like to be able to share out like really closing the loop, not just on this area, but in like any area where we get community feedback, like how it's used and being able to show progress and change and growth. So it's a great question and something that is good to actually like very relevant and keeping in mind for your annual kind of recommendations to the board and the district around like loop closing and accountability, and something I will definitely be like keeping in mind as I'm looking at the scope ahead. So I really appreciate the question. I see Alma's having a hard time sharing the survey, so I will give that a try.
Thank you. And just to your question really quick, the one example of that from last year was there was a couple of people as I was going through the responses that were concerned about seeing their janitors put recycling into like the garbage dumpsters. Um, and there's a couple of reasons that can happen. But there's a part of the survey where you can submit your email if you want. So I was able to email all of those students and talk to them about like why that could be happening and how they could get more information. Obviously, on a larger scale, if we get more responses, that's going to be harder. And I wasn't able to respond to like every question that people had, but I did really try to get back to people. And that was one like kind of common thread that I noticed and wanted to address.
That's great that you're able to do that. I think that's really helpful. Because these surveys are great, but if people don't feel like there's any follow-up to the survey, that can impact future engagement. So if we are showing the students that they're being listened to and their concerns are being addressed, that'll help engagement further.
Yeah, I was also just thinking about, I think one of the questions, I don't know if it survived from last year, was about like what would you want to be engaged? Like what climate actions would you be interested in taking part in? And I think that's just such a neat question to ask. And then I think there was a mechanism for collecting email addresses, and it seems like a lot of labor to try to like follow up with everybody and figure that out. But yeah, maybe let's see, I'm recognizing that last year, which was the inaugural year of the survey, I think the timing worked out where I don't think the data had been really like cleaned, or I don't think it was in a space to be fully presented by the time the Climate Crisis Response Committee had our last meeting. So I'm wondering if like maybe it won't work for this year, but I wonder if in future years we could think about a way that there's enough time so that at least this committee can really see the final data and have a conversation around ways that we could support responding. I don't know if that's what people think about that.
I think since the survey is happening earlier in the year, that will be much more doable. And Alyssa, I just sent you a quick note, but if you want to stop sharing your screen, I think that would be good, and then we can reshare here in a minute.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks.
No worries.
I do like Alyssa's idea about the idea of having the student surveys sooner. So I just want to support that.
What is the close date of the survey right now? Do we have the window?
Last day of April.
The last day of April, okay.
So the idea was that it's like before IB and AP testing during Earth Month. So there's a lot of events where we can share it. And a long enough period of time that if we get halfway through the month and we're like, we're not getting the like amount of responses we wanted to be getting, then we can explore other ways to communicate it.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Yeah. I don't know if I think is it 5:12 is our next meeting. I don't know if that's enough time to at least present preliminary results, but I think that would be great if that's possible, Alma, as a goal. I'm happy to help with that too. Murtaza, was your hand still up from before or new question?
No, is there any thought or was there a thought about including more than just high school students in the survey? 'Cause I know a lot of middle schoolers, especially these days, are more aware and mindful about climate change.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely an intentional decision that we made, but not something that necessarily needs to stay static. Um, the like the kind of phrasing and the way we wrote the um, survey for high schoolers was very specific to high schoolers. And we thought about including middle schoolers or even elementary schoolers, but we would definitely have to reword things and kind of make things a little bit more accessible to younger kids. Um, and also, like high schoolers have a level of autonomy that middle schoolers and elementary schoolers don't. So a lot of our questions are about like what barriers do you have around like being involved in climate action, and those could look very different for a high schooler versus a middle schooler. But I would totally be open at if we can expand this survey one, we could maybe make like a mirror one for middle schoolers. That would be like more specific to their age group. It's definitely something that I think we'd be open to exploring.
Thanks so much, Alma, for stepping in and sharing that and let us know what help we can provide on the survey front. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Did that work out? Great. Next is actually Kat, staff update.
Yeah, and I didn't add anything to this slide today, so we can transition back to talking mode if you want, just for ease of conversation. So my staff update today is really trying to provide some high level, exciting progress points and upcoming things happening around our policy, our climate crisis response policy. We'll also being transparent about some of the capacity and resource challenges that we faced over the last year to be able to provide more kind of detailed updates about what's been going on with our policy progress. So I'll be sharing out a memo with you all here in the next few days. That's just like a draft of the update I'll share with the board. And then that can be used also in being able to provide some context for recommendations that you all make to the board and things like that. And it's all stuff that we've talked about before, but just as a recap, some of the big things I want to highlight and celebrate is that all of our 3 modernizations that are going through for our high schools are all going to be fully electric, which is exciting. I've talked with some folks from our Office of School Modernization, and they said, yes, that like push from this committee last year really resulted in that commitment from the board being something that is not a negotiable part of our different trade-offs that we have to look at in terms of cost savings. So all of our high schools will be fully electric, and we're really getting a chance to practice what this policy looks like and means to be implemented from an infrastructure standpoint for the first time, really, because this policy was passed in March of 2022. So it's been officially, what year is it? 4 years since the policy passed. And the last building that finished construction was Benson, and that was starting design. The design phase for Benson was before the policy was, drafted and passed. So All three Jefferson, Cleveland, and Wells modernizations are now in the like being designed and constructed post the policy passing. So it's just like the first time that they're really getting to see like what does this look like on the ground. So I'm hearing a lot of enthusiasm about that. So that's something to celebrate. And because the goal is to open these high schools by fall of 2029, I believe, which is very ambitious and very exciting, it sets the district up to meet our 50% of greenhouse gas emissions reduced from our 2019 baseline data by 2030, which is really exciting. That when we did our decarbonization roadmap last year, that 50% reductions was really contingent on all three high schools being modernized and built before 2030. And it also is contingent on PGE, our primary utility provider, doing their duty to decarbonize the grid. But that is something that I think we're all really enthusiastic about because these it just really sets us up to be able to more successfully reach our 2040 goals. And I think staff was excited but nervous about the 2030 goals. So it's like it feels really good to be able to say like, yes, this can happen. So we're excited to see how that comes through. Some transparency around providing specific data with the decarbonization goals and greenhouse gas emissions goals is that our energy and sustainability manager left the district in November, and the new energy and sustainability manager will be starting in May. But that is actually going to be past the deadline for the board materials. And also we have an amazing, we had a sustainability manager, Monica Fleischer, who also just started a new role at the district, which is great. But we currently do not have anyone in our sustainability team, is what I'm trying to say. So one position was reduced last year from that team, and now both other folks have been, both of those positions are vacant. So I just wanted to be transparent that there's oftentimes what we would love to show is like a great graph of greenhouse gas emissions and the way like the data of everything coming together. But that's just not a dashboard that I have capacity to get access to right now. So I just wanted to be transparent that that is a metric that may not be available at the May 12th meeting. I'm going to work with our facilities team and see if we can like make it work, but just wanted to be transparent and give a heads up about that. The other thing I wanted to share is that we are working on a process using our social studies curriculum adoption to incorporate our climate justice goals around curriculum into the social studies factors and how we're like looking at where there might be gaps to fill so that we can really build all of this resources and materials out when we adopt our social studies middle school and high school's curricula and really look at like from curricula implementation, what materials need to be built alongside the implementation of that curricula, because we know there's going to be gaps no matter what. So like, what do we need to do to fill those gaps from the onset versus having it be retroactive? So that process is the goal is to be able to really dig into that on April 15th. So here coming soon, and wanted to share that that was transparently also delayed due to some reorganization shifts in our academics department. So I wanted to share the intention of like where that's going and that we are thinking about like when we're doing curricula adoptions, how do we keep our climate literacy goals in mind? And when we're looking at professional development, how do we keep our climate literacy goals in mind? And that kind of dependent on how the organization continues to restructure will depend on how, like what capacity there is for being able to kind of fuse all of that in together. Shannon, I see your hand up if you want to jump in.
Yes, thank you. And we probably touched on this in some of our previous conversations, but about the social studies curriculum, this is in response to the new legislative House bill.
Nope, actually, so social studies has been on the cycle to have a new curriculum adoption, or a curriculum adoption because we haven't had like adopted social studies curricula at PBS in like 20 plus years. And the House bill that passed helps definitely provide some great targets for what standards in social study overlap with climate literacy. So the Department of Education provided a great outline of like what standards, education standards in science, social studies, and health intersect with climate literacy right now. And then the state will be developing new like climate literacy standards in 2029. So that outline of standards from the state really helped me provide a framework for doing that crosswalking of like what of the social studies curricula that we were looking at, what are the different units that teach to these different standards that the state outlined as connected to climate literacy, and how, and then given our goals of climate literacy at PPS, which includes like a social justice element and connection to place-based learning and project-based learning, kind of using that rubric, really analyzing like how well do those units connect to our needs as a district given our climate literacy goals, which I think take the state's literacy goals and just like push them a little further, as we like to do here at PPS. Yeah, looking to see where the gaps are that we can like really take it to the next level with intentional supplemental materials that just really enhance the student experience and like kind of get those into the next.
Is the work being done with any partnerships with some of the groups in Oregon that are already working on this type of curriculum?
So I am working pretty closely with, well, so the Oregon Climate
Thought Leaders
sorry,
Committee?
Thought Leaders Committee. Sorry, I'm thinking
Yes.
of the acronym, the OECE, Oregon Educators for Climate Education, has
Well,
an
I
amazing
think they're
host of
pretty closely
resources.
entwined. Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and have been working with that group to
Okay.
put together some frameworks. So it's really looking at what, yeah, what connections and like real leverage points there are in the processes we're already doing, since our staff really at the moment are not in a position to be like adding work or scope, or we certainly cannot add new curricula to already adopted curricula, at least recently adopted curricula. We need to like get that stuff down. So really looking at like where that like perfect leverage point is, and that's where the timeline with the social studies adoption is just like works really nicely with, okay, we've got all of these great resources and frameworks now, given the work of the last few years, and then being able to work with that group as they're like reviewing the scope of materials that they're testing in right now with students to see what's going to work best and where we can bridge the gaps. And I know this is a lot of information to share verbally, but I'm trying to like provide kind of a, yeah, high level, but also with the caveat of like, well, it also, frankly, we've had a major organization shift in their academic department. So we're just, that's my intention of where we're going to be at by the May meeting. And then we're going to see, yeah, just what we're able to make happen, because anything that can happen is great. So.
Awesome, because I know, like I said, the Thought Leaders Committee's already been having a lot of these conversations, and especially with constraints in manpower and things like that, if the wheel isn't being reinvented twice.
Yeah, totally. Nope. Definitely in conversation with those folks, and then yeah, trying to really think about how to support different districts across Oregon who are all trying to implement climate curricula and not reinvent wheels as much as possible. So that's the goal for sure.
Thank you for sharing.
Of course, yeah. That's my big like curriculum update. You all heard a really robust student empowerment and action update from Carrie Jones Bahara in January. So if anyone's watching and hasn't learned about that, our student climate projects coordinator is amazing, Carrie, and has just really like that Portland Clean Energy Fund student-led climate projects has really allowed for like a much wider expanse of climate action and empowerment in our district. So we're really excited to see that grow and continue to grow. And then the last thing I want to add, and then I will turn it back over, is that, and this is kind of a board update too, is that on April 21st, the Facilities Infrastructure and Operations Committee, FIOC, as we like to say, is going to have a conversation just about air quality and the kind of differences in like current ventilation standards at PPS and air purification, air purifier distribution and how that's going and current processes and things like that. So that's very relevant to the climate policy related, especially to like Pillar 2 under climate resilience. And there's a community group that's been proposing language to add air quality metrics to the climate policy. So just wanted to flag that that's a conversation that's happening in that committee. So if anyone's interested, it's April 21st. So I'll share some more materials and information about that as it gets closer, but just wanted to put that on your radar. So thanks for enduring my verbal update. And it's not like the best way to share information, but with the changing of spring break happening like yesterday, I think that just like was like, okay, this is kind of the big highlights of all the things that's going to be in my staff memo, and then I'll be able to share that written document with you all very soon. Any questions or inspirations, concerns, ideas? Yeah, Alyssa, good.
I was wondering, Kat, as we get like towards the end of the school year and then thinking about just like climate change and heat in our buildings, and then already like we've got furlough days now, and I'm just thinking like I'm imagining, like June and then it's hot. And so I'm wondering how involved have you been and the climate staff been in thinking about the like cooling of the schools? And like I know at the beginning of the school year we had that incident. Can you share a little bit about that? And sorry, it's like off the cuff, but
No, absolutely. It's one of my favorite topics. I think it's a huge systems challenge, and those are the things I'm fascinated in trying to solve. Um, so with there's so many things that go into that. So with the furlough days, the school year now ends on June 5th, as opposed to June 9th. So I don't want to offer a bright side, but if there is one, it might be that fewer days going into June might mean less chance for intense heat. But that's just like, what it's a perspective, I suppose. So yeah, I've been involved about creative strategies to reduce the impact of heat on our schools. I will say that with the Portland Clean Energy Funds, especially especially we're able to. We've done quite a bit of weatherization work in a few different schools, and there's plans of implementing like some new HVAC systems updates in a handful of schools as well with the new MESD collaborative grant that we applied for with the Portland Clean Energy Fund. Those are like long-term projects, but that money does have to be spent by like 2029. So hopefully projects that will be rolling out soon. Yes, and so that's what I can share right now. I think we're always collaboratively thinking about how to have more immediate solutions to heat. There was the cooling um, pilot that we did in September that had some pros and cons, big fans and buildings, but they did rely on like diesel generators. And so there's like definitely trade-offs to trying to have like the airflow and the level of energy that's required to have that kind of pop-up solution. It does often also require like a big bank of energy like diesel. Just so that's not a very articulate response, but I can say that we're like constantly thinking about it. And there's the funding and the prioritization of like there was HVAC money outlined in the bond funding, and I think I'm not sure how much of it was moved to seismic, but I can like get that information for you all if you're interested. Um, but there's anytime there's an opportunity for like a big bucket of money to go towards this work, updating an HVAC system in schools is pretty pricey. It's about $10 million a school. So we received $16.9 million in our first Portland Clean Energy Fund infrastructure grant. And so everyone was like, yay, HVAC updates. We're like, yeah, it's like 1.5 the HVACs. So we're trying to like stretch that money to support as many schools as we can. But the new grant from them is very exciting. passive cooling. So Shannon put in the chat. If Shannon, do you want to just like share that vocally? Just again, since like folks online can't see our chats,
No,
it's good to share.
thank you. And I may have brought this up before. I've kind of been into this idea a bit. I'm gonna mispronounce it, so please forgive me. Mashrabias, basically, from what I understand, in some of the Middle Eastern and Muslim cultures that have, been in extreme heat, the idea of these kind of lattice-like structures, or it mirrors a lot of their artwork, but where it creates more of a shade, but still allowing some light to show through. And they can just be, I'm wondering if something like this could be adapted for sides of buildings that are hit more by a lot of heat. They don't have to actually even be, as far as I've seen some modernization of, attached to the building, but can stand away from the building a bit. Again, a lattice type structure. So it creates some extra shading. Plants can also grow on them, like we do in our gardens, that add more moisture to the air. But once again, they don't have to be super expensive additions to buildings, and can contribute towards the cooling of the rooms that where the sun hits those classrooms the hardest.
I
Is that,
love
am I making any sense? I
it.
don't have
It makes a lot of sense.
any visualization at the moment. Um, some students might even build these out of wood for certain parts, or I mean, you can have more permanent structures as well. And forgive me once again if I'm mispronouncing the terminology.
I'm gonna look, I just wrote that down. I'm gonna look more into it. We may put that on our student project playbook as ideas for students with their project funds, and I'll keep investigating. Any ideas that are low cost and can help, just really like what you said, the goal is to as in like the interim solutions is to just help prevent that big fluctuation of so like increasing that greenery and moisture and everything can really help prevent the big fluctuations in temperature, like from it getting higher. So appreciate that a lot. I'm gonna look more into that. Thank you. Alyssa.
I was also reading about, some of those like just like cling, um, like UV kind of like things that go on the window that like are just like go right up on the window and like create like less absorption of UV rays. Is that something that's already been done? And has there been like a plan to think about what schools could utilize that low cost intervention?
Yep, we've done, we just call that window film, the UV heat reflective window film. And that has been utilized at a few schools. So I can ask our facilities team to provide actually like a list of schools where that has happened. And things like even though like updating windows can be a major like energy savings as well as a major like heating and cooling savings. So that's an area we're trying to help invest in different buildings and stuff as like a more interim solution. So yeah, when you see like we'll provide an update with um, the FAOC community that I'll share with you all, regardless of if you're able to watch it, that has a lot more in-depth description about like what the Portland Clean Energy monies have been going to. When we're talking about like thermal comfort upgrades, those are some of the different things we're talking about, or like the window film and just increasing the weatherization of buildings to make them more resilient to the different fluctuations in temperature. So yeah. Great ideas, though. Always love if you have other ideas, feel free to always email me because we're always looking for any creative solution we can to get through those shoulder seasons that are just particularly warm.
I just put a link in the chat. I know people can't see, but just has some from an AI collection of different examples of
Yeah, these are
installation
beautiful.
screens.
I love this. I'm thinking 3D printers. I'm thinking like there's like all sorts. I'm sure our CTE program has a pretty cool wood cutting technology that could do some cool stuff with this. So thank you so much, Shannon, for sharing that. Okay, that's all I have really for the staff update at the moment. Again, thank you for bearing with the flow of information. And yeah, happy to follow up and provide any other information after I've been able to share that memo out with you all.
Thanks so much, Kat. All right. I'm gonna try my best to share I share it again. Let's see what we can do. Try to get to slideshow. All right. Thanks, Kat. So I wanted to spend the rest of our time really talking through like like I said, the 3 work groups that I thought we could break up into to try to get some things done. So these are our committee deliverables. Thank you to Alma and Leah for taking the reins on the student survey. As you can tell, we're all really excited to support that and think about how we can make sure that the results of the survey are incorporated into the PPS climate work. The other 3 buckets are the district AI use recommendations. And for those of you that were able to attend our last meeting, we were joined by, I think it was 3 folks from that work group. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking through just like any reflections and thoughts that we have. Then, like I said, the policy coming up for review and what recommendations we might want to make or other questions we have, and then the annual report to the school board. So today's goal is to really just have some time to hear from everybody. Any like reflections you have, suggestions, questions, so that then when we break up into our smaller groups, we can at least kind of have absorbed the full committee's like questions and thoughts. So moving forward onto the district AI governance. One of the things I was thinking from that meeting was just, I don't know about other folks that were there, but I know I had a lot of just like feelings about AI that are actually unrelated to the climate policy. And so thinking about within this work and the scope that we want to think about it, really, how does the district's use or policy around AI impact our ability to meet the climate crisis response policy's goals? And so I will like leave this up here, but if people want to share, I would really love to hear if anybody had time to like sit with that conversation or new thoughts that you have. It would be great to hear from folks about how you're thinking about it and how you think we might want to form our recommendations. All right, I just got back to the picture. So I see Alma's hand up and Shannon. So Alma, you want to share?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this and I totally agree. I think a lot of the things that I said in that meeting were not actually related to the climate and to our policy. But one of I think the most important parts of the policy is about climate literacy and kind of education. And so I think that in terms of AI recommendations, if the district is going to have an AI policy that allows for any AI use at all, I think it would be really great to have that go along with an educational piece about AI, about the environmental impacts of AI. And then also, I'm not sure how realistic this is, but maybe if we could quantify AI use in the district, that could be something that we can work. I mean, my sense is that that would be a part of the district's carbon emissions, and like indirect emissions. So I don't know if that would be something that could be worked into sort of our graph of emissions.
I think that's a great question. I was wondering about that too, about where this would fit into like the different 3 scopes of emissions. And I was assuming it was a scope 3, Kat, as our expert.
Yeah, I would put that under, well, there's like 2 sides of it. One is like actual oh, your
I did
screen.
it again. I know.
It's okay, no worries. Or is the actual like plug-in computer power use of AI, I guess, if you're like using it on a like using a laptop. So I don't know that we'd see a huge difference in our own like electricity use with that outside of students using, their laptops normally. And then scope 3 for anyone who's unfamiliar would be any emissions from like our supply chain. So right now we don't currently calculate scope 3 emissions within our overall emissions goals. We really look at like the things that the district is directly producing, as well as our transportation limited to like buses and like district-wide transportation. So that being said, that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity to like um, yeah, just be mindful. I think it's always important to be mindful when we're talking. Like a lot of our policy goals impact scope 3 emissions, like prioritizing local foods, for instance, versus like global supply chain foods and stuff like that. So yeah. Oh, Alyssa, you're muted. It's all good.
It's an interesting time to talk about this, given that we are also going to talk about the review of the policy. So if there are things around AI so they're like interconnected with this opportunity to discuss like what we think should be included. Shannon, thank you for waiting.
Shannon, you're muted as well.
Took my hand down, forgot to unmute. So I mirroring some other comments, I have really strong feelings about AI that I personally have been wrestling with and trying to get my own education on. AI's here, it's not going away, but like any tool, using it for the good, and especially honestly when it comes to these environmental impacts, I think I have a lot of similar feelings to that Alma mentioned in the previous meeting. AI really impacts the environment currently. I'm considering the possibility that one day we'll improve the technology enough that has a lower impact on the environment, that we can have our AI, our cake and eat it too. But right now it is here, but making informed decisions. So something along the lines of what I really would like to see is that the teaching of, hey, if we are using, like if a teacher, which is part of PPS, is creating a lesson plan, that's a lesson plan they're going to use multiple times or share. So it's this one-time short impact that will be repeated without the impacts. Does that make sense? And even for student uses to have aware. I know, I believe it was Alma or somebody brought up, the gentleman speaking last time, that there were some students developing an app that could kind of measure how much water uses or water impact for each AI use they did. Some questions on AI are take much more energy. It takes a lot more research for AI to come up with the response desired, as well as some questions could just go to Chat GPT because it's more of a simplistic, and excuse me, can go to straight to Google, which isn't a Google internet search, which isn't going to have the impacts of more of an AI answer. So an awareness of how we make our choices, just like with other things. We cannot eliminate AI altogether. It's not going to happen. So how do we use it wisely with conscious of our choosing, with conscious of our decisions, consciousness of our decisions? I really want to I personally stand behind this, and I think a few other people made similar statements. I think this can be done with thought and consideration. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Shannon. Yeah, Murtaza.
Yeah, definitely agree with the concerns that the others have raised. I honestly, I also feel a little bit even more strongly with regards to the negative aspects of it. And I I think it's the 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 thought that it's here to stay and we have to navigate around it is likely going to be the scenario, but I don't think it's necessarily that we need to put ourselves into that frame of mind. There are a lot of technologies that arise but once the cost benefit analysis is done, and it can be decided that, hey, this is not worth the cost, and those technologies are no longer pursued. That could be the scenario as well with AI, which is not an unreasonable stand to take. Do I think that's necessarily going to happen? Probably not, with how hard it's being pushed across the spectrum. But I think from our standpoint, we definitely need to look at it from multiple avenues, from climate impact, not energy use, water use, even impacts on local communities. From I know a lot of us probably saw the recent study that was put out with the impacts on local temperature rises. I think they were projecting 9 degrees centigrade local temperature rise in the area of the data centers that are being used to power these technologies. So that's another concern. And the concern that we've raised before about the 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 social equitable impact with regards to how this technology is being developed and built. How there is a significant impact on communities around the world in the global south, where resource exploitation is being done to help build up this technology. I think that should also be, not sure how we can address that, but at least provide education regarding it.
Thanks. Yeah, Kat.
I really appreciate this discussion, and I'm thinking of like some tangible recommendations or takeaways from a staff perspective that could be helpful. And one of the things I'm thinking of is like something that we include in our contracting process around our certified businesses, or referencing our climate policy and saying, show how you're going to meet these goals. So recommendations for same kind of procurement around like just at the very least disclosure of environmental impacts and social impacts. I can bet that most of these companies have some kind of ESG, environmental social governance report at the very least, or ask about like carbon offsetting, or relationships with local communities, that kind of thing. Like, just wanted to plant that seed as potential recommendations that staff could use when putting together like a request for procurement, sort of putting out there for, so that when people put in bids to like do a contract with us that is an AI contract, or even just any technology contract, if you want to expand it beyond that, that's something that I noticed is kind of missing in the policy, is guidelines around that. I'm gonna make up a whole new like scope 4 emissions of like the the like virtual world. But being able to at least disclose that as part of the bidding process, and then requiring, or I would love to have on like the climate justice website like a disclosure or links to all of the different kind of environmental and social reporting that the different organizations that we contract with regularly do, to be able to say like, yeah, we have a business license and partnership with Office Depot, so like here's kind of what their policy is and what they're doing for the community and the environment. And just to provide that transparency, I think that could be something really tangible that staff could take and use as like a recommendation and moving forward.
I like the transparency idea. And of course, we can't by any means mandate anything of contractors, but transparency and getting the conversation open and started, I think, is a great idea.
I agree. Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, Leah.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm on call and I had to step away for a long moment, so this may have been a point that was already said, and I apologize. But I'm thinking that one of the things that could be a win-win around this is, since we are focused on Portland Public Schools, is to work with the schools and the educators to come up with a plan to codify and limit the use of AI in the classroom and its effect on curriculum. So we're doing two things, which is we're protecting the brains of our children so that they're actually learning, but we're also putting a policy into place to limit AI so that we as a school system are not over relying and overusing this technology that is so depleting to the energy grid and water. And so we create a policy to really structure around this and figure out how are we going to use this tool judiciously. We're not saying no, but we're saying we're going to use it in this framework and we're going to really protect the educational integrity of our school system. So that's number one. The transparency thing, totally agree with that 100%. And then also the vendors. I'm not sure how reliable the information is on renewable energy sources with these vendors and data centers, but it's a place to start. And I agree with that, to look at vendors that are committed to renewable energy sources. This is like the choice between worse and terrible, right? So we're kind of doing the best that we can, but I would also say you guys speak the language of program monitoring and evaluation a lot. And so if we are going to be generating policy and procedure around AI in the classroom, how are we going to look at our vendors? Having some sort of program monitoring and evaluation for this so that this is an iterative process. We don't just say, oh, problem solved, done, but we're actually circling back to be like, okay, are we still transparent? Are we going to go with only Anthropic? Are we going with Google, Microsoft? Like, who's doing the best? And creating the least amount of damage to our communities and our planet. And those are my thoughts. And sorry if that was already said.
Was not already said. Thanks, Leah. America, did you have your hand up? Did you want to share something?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been toying around with is my head is along the lines that what Kat was bringing up about the procurement process, because we could easily say if you're going to be involved in this AI stuff and you're going to be a vendor with PPS, then if the contract is X amount of dollars, $100,000, then you have to meet these metrics. If it's $200,000, then you have to meet these other metrics, like something like that. That way there's could be a little bit more scrutiny. And then one of the things that I've noticed around AI is that even the utility companies don't really talk to each other about it. So maybe we could step it up and say that we ask for a local consortium that has some kind of power and can delegate certain policy initiatives so that it's a win-win for everyone. I don't think AI is going to go away, and I just don't think it's equitable right now. So I want to be able to say, I want to be able to have a plan that says, what you're doing is not, it's just not equitable. But that's the only way I can think of doing it, those two things. So that's all I had to say.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think these are all wonderful and I'm excited for the work group that's going to work on this to think about it. I did follow up with the folks that came to the last meeting because we had talked about they said that they could try to give us some data on AI usage on district laptops. And then I was also curious to see, I know that they had a survey that they sent out to families or to the Portland public school community about how they felt about AI. And I'm very curious to see like what those results are um, for our committee and for everybody else. But I think something for us to think about in our recommendations is how do we want to continue to engage with that work group? And also, yeah, is there a recommendation for somebody who's in that work group who is always having the climate focus? I think we could really expand our recommendations to whatever we think would make the most sense as this work group is like getting off the ground, the AI work group. Just for the sake of time, we might move on unless there's any last thoughts about AI. Okay, great. Thank you for everybody for sharing. I really appreciate it. Okay. So moving on now to the policy review for the CCRP. These are some notes that I just threw down from the last meeting where Eddie Wong shared his thoughts about what we should be thinking about in our recommendations. So he talked about thinking about like what's working related to the policy, what needs to be updated, what needs to be strengthened. And then I just threw out some considerations that have been like kicking around in my head. Um, Jane and Kat, are you the two people that have been here since since the policy's inception? Is that true? Okay.
Jane has been here since the policy's inception, since before then, even helping shepherd it. I started a few months after the policy was passed.
Okay. Awesome. So I don't know if I'm not exactly sure how to garner people's feedback about this policy because I know we don't all have it like totally memorized or if anybody wants to share some thoughts that they have, or Jane, I don't know if you want to share from thinking about how the policy was created, how you might consider going about thinking about areas that need to be strengthened or updated, but I'll just open it up to folks.
I do have a few thoughts, but I would definitely need to take a reread through the policy. Like I like the considerations that you have there, and I think that the policy generally is like a level above that, where those things still can kind of exist and flourish. And it's like a healthy evolution of what PPS is doing in these areas and what the activity in the community. But the AI and the new technology could be, I think there probably is an opportunity to add something there. And I was thinking about, as you were talking about the procurement process, there's definitely something about procurement in the existing policy. And that was one thing that I wanted to refresh my memory on exactly what that says. And maybe there's like I don't know if it's just up for interpretation or rewording. And then one other thing that is not really a policy related item that I've been thinking about is more process for the committee. And you all as like newer committee members, I'm curious how it feels for you, but I wonder if there's some different pacing that would make more sense going forward, where like recruitment happens at X time of year, onboarding happens like probably like during the summer, and then we can hit the ground running. Like the new people do an onboarding that's not like taking up one of the actual committee meeting times, because it just kind of feels like, oh my gosh, we're already at April, and we have to report to the board, and we're just sort of like I feel like this meeting has been really productive, and I really think people had great contributions, and then we're almost done for the year, but I don't know how really to fix that. And then the other thing that in terms of like pacing is the staff memo and report versus like our committee's report. I feel like it would make more sense to have the staff report and then some time pass for us to like receive that, digest it, and then like reflect back to the board on our impressions from it instead of them happening at the same time. So those are just some of my things that are percolating in my brain.
Thanks for that, Jane. Yeah, in full agreement. Just for my 1 year here. Yeah, Alma.
Yeah, I have just a really quick comment. I totally agree with you, Jane. I think that kind of the timeline of the committee could definitely be improved. But one just super simple idea I had for so that we're not like floundering when we have to present to the board, is that we could kind of write our recommendations like throughout the year rather than all at once at the end of the year. Like if we have a meeting about AI, we can write AI related recommendations like at the very end of that meeting or at the start of the next meeting or something like that, so that like by the end of the year when we're getting ready to like send our recommendations to the board, we already have a lot of work that we've done and we did that work while it was fresh in our brain.
Yeah, I love that idea.
I'd also like to take some ownership over the lack of tangible thing to be able to react to this year, since the dashboard program that we had gotten up and running last year was no longer being funded, and then we worked on something to replace that. And I think just with all the things happening, that hasn't officially launched yet in the timeline that we had hoped we were. So I just wanted to like also provide some ownership of the staff updates for you all this year have certainly been less um, like something strong to react to, especially with some of our prominent uh, in-house expertise, finding new opportunities out there or having positions change. So I am cautiously optimistic, but it is a good reminder too for me that there will be some recruitment for the CCRC happening ideally by the end of the school year. And so if there's recommendations around kind of doing some onboarding over the summer, perhaps that's something that could be looked at for sure. Jane, I saw your hand up if you wanted to pop in.
I was just starting to type in the chat. I just wanted to say I really didn't like, I truly wasn't saying that as a criticism of like how this is going. I think it really is like a learning of the committee's process and yeah, just figuring out with a couple years under our belt how to do these things and when to report and what makes sense.
Yeah, I agree though. I think that there is probably a way for us to, because I know at least being a new member last year, I think I was the only new member though. So it felt like there was a little bit more momentum, I think, because so many other people were so immersed in it. But as we get new members and just trying to find your footing and understand what's going on, yeah, I think there is a way to improve it. And maybe if we had sort of like standardized topics that we talked about every meeting from staff, and so that we could kind of continually see progress or where challenges are happening, maybe we could, yeah, standardize a little bit more so everybody can kind of see that progress as we move forward. And I really liked Alma's suggestion too of like, if we have a topic we're focused on, let's just like in the moment kind of make sure we've collected what we would want to share with the board. And I'll also even say, like, on the other hand, too, Eddie had suggested that we could have more opportunities to connect with the board if we wanted to share kind of like smaller updates. And, we are part of the committee's goal is to report to the board once a year. But even thinking outside of the box, if we feel like a big annual report is really not the best way to communicate how things are going, we could think of something else. So, yeah, Jane.
The board has said that in the past to like other board members. Julia Brim Edwards, for example, who was our previous board liaison, has suggested that. And I think it's a great idea. And then I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if I can volunteer to be that person to like regularly attend a board meeting or whatever. So there's this like delicate balance of capacity. But I mean, if someone could do that, or if it's even like a written thing that we could feed to Eddie or, Director Wang or whoever our board liaison is at that year. Yeah, I think that would be great just to keep the visibility and keep it on people's minds that we're here and we're paying attention and these are the things that are happening. The board meets monthly, and then there are committees that meet even more regular, or actually they meet twice a month.
Yeah, they've got a regular session and then like a work session. But they're feel kind of very similar. So it's like every other Tuesday is their big board meetings. Yep.
So if we were to have a representative show up, would we just show up maybe once a month at the main meetings, or would we be relevant to the work meetings as well?
And he was sharing that like there could be, like just a 5-10 minute quarterly update from the committee on how things are going. Like, or if he's offered to share his, like when Alyssa sends a little recap from the meeting, he's offered to share that during their committee reports. But he's like, you guys would also just come and talk at that time. I don't have to be the one talking. So, yeah, he's very supportive of being visible and kind of elevating the work. Because again, this is an area where PPS is excelling beyond pretty much every other school district. And it's just not something you get to hear about very often, is like where we're just like really above and beyond. So I think that he was really eager and excited to be able to elevate the work that the district's doing in this area. And something I wanted to that had come to mind when you all were talking about like how to structure meetings is that what the committee has been very helpful, and this might like kind of coincide into the next topic, is providing just from the community's perspective like what the biggest priorities are, because this policy is huge and I think that can be something that can feel a little overwhelming to like how to manage it from a leadership perspective, is that it's everything everywhere all at once. And so I'm like, I will help everyone integrate this into their scopes, but having a set of priorities of like this is where like it seems like the district should really focus its time has been really helpful. Just year after year, and keeping that messaging at the forefront of like this year, the committee really recommended expanding volunteer capacity and partnerships, and that's what we're gonna like really hit hard on and stuff like that. So I just wanted to share that as well when you all are thinking about the role of the committee and how to elevate this work that's going on.
Yeah, just thinking logistically, how are our recommendations will be our recommendations, and you will also then be providing, I'm assuming, recommendations also for the policy review, or like how much of your feedback can we incorporate?
I've never gone through this process before, so I'm actually not entirely positive how it works, but I know that it gets introduced at the policy committee, and then it's not just like one meeting. I think it's like an ongoing conversation to make some review. I've already shared that I really don't, I think that if any changes happen to this policy, there has to be a comprehensive community engagement like pathway. And so, given the other extensive community engagement that's happening over the next 9 months around the kind of like right sizing the district side of things, I'm not sure the capacity we're going to have to be able to do a robust community engagement, but I don't think any. Anyway, so all that being said, I will let you know as soon as I find out kind of more about what the process is. But yeah, I'm not sure, but I do intend on being at those meetings and being able to provide kind of feedback and perspective, given the work that we've been able to do and what's worked well and what areas have been um, evident of needing some adjusting language of. Mhm.
I'm just thinking about yeah, our group's capacity and how we're feeling about working on this feels like a little amorphous to me. And then just thinking about I'm wondering when this is going to be brought to the policy review committee. Um,
I think for my recommendation, just from not having heard about this being on the policy review committee in April at the very least, would be to focus on the other major scopes, and to keep this can kind of be something that's like iterative and continuously coming back to. But just wanted to share that as a potential way to like use resources really intentionally. If it's not going to be before May, then it may not be a big a priority to like focus the whole group's attention on it at the moment.
yeah. Thanks for that, Kat. Yeah, Jane.
Um, I'm sorry. Where, so this policy review reflection, what's driving this? Like, because so when this policy came to be, the way that the policy committee operated at the time, there was like a really long list of things that they wanted to tackle in the committee. And it was very difficult to get a spot on the agenda to even get any time for them to consider things. And I'm not sure how much that's changed, but it's like not insignificant to even get a place on the agenda so it was this because of something Director Wang had suggested? Is that what it's coming from?
Well, so from what I understand is that roughly every 4 years, policies become available for kind of like review and refinement just to make sure that they're keeping up with the time, so to speak. So from what I understood, it was that kind of cyclical process of like, oh, this is about when we might start looking at this, paired with there's been some community advocates at the facilities infrastructure and operations committee that have been advocating for policy language changes to the climate resilience goals and other aspects of the climate policy. So I think that also sparked some conversation of like, oh, if we're going to add, if we're considering language in this area, is there an opportunity to consider other language as well? So I just wanted to flag that as I think where that was coming from. But I will make sure that before anything gets in front of any policy committee that I will like, I've made it very aware and present that I would really like this committee to be involved early / perhaps first in that process. So yeah.
Yeah, I think we were notified relatively briefly that it was maybe going to be on the April meeting docket, and then Director Wang on the last meeting said that that it had been pushed off. So I think it's still up in the air as to when it's going to come up, right?
Yeah, I had heard a rumor that it was going to be on the March 30th meeting. And so I was like, oh, that's right after spring break. We need to like know about this. And then that was just a miscommunication. So I will let everyone know though as soon as I find out.
Okay, I wanted to thanks for that. I'm recognizing that we have 5 minutes left. And so I think this actually talking about this, I think still is really fruitful and useful. And I think some of the things that we've talked about could probably be incorporated into our annual report. And I'm wondering, I'm just going to go, so this is we annual report. I had written up here the recommendations that we had from our last year's annual report. But for the sake of time, I think what I'll do is make sure that the previous year's annual report is shared via email to everybody, so you have it as well as some other materials too, to make sure that everybody can look at it and think about that and where we're at with regard to those recommendations. But I wanted to move on to this one. So these were the 3 work groups. And my hope for today was to designate a lead for each of these, just somebody that would kind of like make sure that people are meeting and maybe like send out meeting invites, and then also discuss what each work group needs to be successful in case there's something that we need to get for folks. And so I'm wondering, maybe I'll open it up to the group, like, do we want to have a work group that's working on the policy review, or do we want to put that on the back burner and instead utilize folks for the AI recommendations and also for the annual report? There's no right or wrong answer. Yeah, Shannon.
I did send out an email, depending, I think my personal opinion is consideration of manpower, versus what needs to be done. And I say that specifically because, as I've mentioned, I do have to go into surgery here soon. I do plan to give my best to this board, but if I needed to miss something, I do not want to be in a position, if I can plan in advance and be transparent, that me missing a day or having a little bit of foggy brain days is going to be crucial to the success of our team.
Yeah. Thanks.
And I don't know if anyone else has any positions like that, but I'd like to see what needs to be done get done. Again, I'm committed to giving everything I've got.
I'll say we are limited to having 4 people on each work group so that we don't violate public meeting rules unless we wanted to make it a public meeting.
It can definitely be a public meeting too. Like I can make that happen pretty easily. I just need to know like 48 hours in advance would be ideal. Yeah.
I should be good by the next meeting on April 15th. If I have to do any preliminary work to April 15th, though, it could be dependent on my situation.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Thanks, Shannon. I guess I'm thinking that if we still don't have a date listed yet for the policy to come under review, if we also think that that's going to be an iterative process, it's not going to be like a one and done, and that was our only opportunity, then maybe we utilize the next like just month to think about how we want to engage with the AI work group and also to like put together the final report. Does anybody disagree or have another thought? Okay, great. Murtaza, Jane, and Leah, who's not here, if you guys want to let me know if you have one of the groups that you're more interested in being on. I'll also say it seems like we always have 1 or 2 people that can't make the meeting anyways, so I actually am not too worried about us going over our limit, and if we do, we can always check in with Kat. So I'm happy to be the lead for the annual report. Does anybody want to be the district AI use lead? Which will just be like making sure we have a meeting set.
You can do it.
Sorry, who was that? Was that Alma? Was that you, Alma?
Yeah, that was me.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to help you with whatever you need. Um, okay, so I was thinking that we would for the annual report, these are our next steps. By the end of this week, I'll send out some pertinent materials to folks related to past reports and whatever else might be useful to us as we look through think about these things. If folks want to use that 4:15 meeting to meet individually in groups, that might be a good time since everybody's got it kind of blocked off on their calendar, or you could choose another time to meet. I set the date as 4:20 for when the annual report group would send a draft to the committee for review so that folks can let us know any feedback that they have, and that gives us like a little over a week to finalize it. Kat, you said that we had to vote to approve it. Can we do that via email?
I think something like a vote needs to be a public, I think that's considered a meeting is anytime you're like talking. So what the has been successful in the past is like agreeing on what the report would like kind of say or the recommendations made and the format and stuff and then assigning some folks to finish drafting it. But I do think it would benefit that group for the larger group to be able to provide feedback on a draft in a to just say like okay with these edits then you're like go forth and finalize. Yeah, so I would be hesitant to I'd have to like double check, I guess, with our board committee folks if people voting via email would be allowed, but I have a feeling that that would be considered a meeting, which would need to be public. So um, I'm wondering if there's a time prior the 28th where the group could get together to just review um, um, the draft and provide some feedback with the caveat that the week like the with the Wednesday before the 28th is Earth Day and is a very busy week. for everyone, I'm sure. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, not to have like whiplash, but I guess the other option is to use that time at on the 15th to take maybe like the first half hour or whatever to discuss kind of like these larger goals that we would want to bring up. Um, and maybe before then, folks on the annual report group could like draft them, and then we could all meet and talk about them. And then after that, whatever time remains could be time to like do work. Um, Maybe I could like see a show of hands if that will work for everybody. Awesome. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sticking with me as we process that out. Um, just to like everybody know, like Kat was saying that this facilities FIOB committee meeting to talk about safe air. If anybody wants to, is that going to be I guess that's a public meeting that we could tune into if we wanted to, Kat. Okay,
Yep,
awesome.
that'll be at the boardroom if you want to come in person, or it'll be streamed on the board YouTube page as well.
Wonderful. And then submitting our annual report to the board on 4/28. The presentation, in the past, it's been I think two committee members have gone to present to the board. So if anybody would like to, I'm happy to go. If somebody would like to join me, please let me know. Keep that in mind, and we can finalize that maybe on the 4/15 meeting. And then our next quarterly meeting after that will be on the 13th, and that's when hopefully we can have a broader discussion about the student survey, also what the AI work group is thinking, and then also any maybe like recap from the board meeting. And maybe like just like what Jane was saying about and Alma about kind of like our process and our committee and the pacing of it, I think is like really interesting. I'd love to make sure that we talk about that a little bit more too. So thank you all. It was really nice to be together, and I really appreciate everybody's contribution and just coming together as a committee to figure this out. So thanks so much. All right, take care. Meeting adjourned. Oh, Shannon, yeah.
Sorry, really quick. Regarding the 4/21, I'm interested in attending that. I apologize, I didn't get a chance to write down. The link will just be sent to us.
Yep,
Okay.
it'll be on the board website, but I'll make a note to follow up with you all and share information about that committee in the
Okay.
materials that get submitted beforehand. So yeah.
Thank you. And I'll consider for 4/28 as well too, if you like Alyssa, you said needing someone with you as well. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. All right, take care. Thank you.